Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. Recently, a lot of the speculation around Watts's psychology and the kind of monster that he is, in inverted commas, has sort of rotated and cycled around, basically orbited around this idea of evil, that we can kind of explain everything that happened here through the concept that Watts is evil. That is simultaneously an explanation and a non-explanation, because when we're talking about evil, what are we talking about? And this raises a really interesting question and a really interesting topic, and it's a question that True Crime Rocket Science is preoccupied with, not only in the Watts case but in all the cases that I cover. And it is this concept of evil. How does evil come into the world? What is the nature of evil? And the better way of asking the question is, what is the nature of man, and how does the nature of man come into the world? So I've had a lot of people say over the time that I've covered the Watts case, you will never understand this case, you will never understand what happened here. No one will ever know except Chris Watson, whatever, and that is not that is complete anathema to True Crime Rocket Science. We say you will know, you can know, and we do know. And so in this short episode we'll be dealing with someone who I admire immensely. I've also had people ask me where I've been educated and all that. Well, I had a university career spanning a little bit more than a decade. I've been to university, I've been away, I've been back, I've done postgraduate courses, neither here nor there, in areas such as law, which I studied for about 3 years, in areas such as it's called Bachelor of Science, but in areas that includes physics, also economics, also marketing. So I'm probably I spent a career studying, which would probably qualify me as a doctor of something, but ultimately I'm not a doctor. But I did study a lot. But I would rather give credit to someone who mentored me and who I've learned a lot from about the human being, about the nature of being human, about human psychology. And that is Ernest Becker. Obviously he didn't mentor me personally. I was mentored through reading his books and researching his philosophies and his attitudes. And if I've come anywhere in the world, it's by standing on the shoulder of giants, him being probably the main candidate. If you've never heard of him, Ernest Becker was an American writer and cultural anthropologist. In 1974 he wrote a Pulitzer Prize-winning book, The Denial of Death. That certainly stands apart to me as one of the best books ever written, or certainly one of the best books I've ever read. I don't think many people would associate that particular book with true crime. I have, and I think it's the reason why I've managed to provide the meaningful insights and analysis that I have. It's through his prescient analysis into the human condition, into human nature, that I've followed, and that has allowed me to make similar, to find sort of similar roots into the complexity that is the science of man. And so, as you can imagine, this episode is going to be slightly different. Just a brief look at what Becker says about evil and how I've interpreted that briefly in terms of this particular case. Before we get there, please subscribe, like, share amongst your networks, and if you found this area interesting, I certainly do, please leave a comment and let's get started. So there have been people who've said that Chris Watts is evil, and that's supposed to be some kind of explanation. In a way it is an explanation, but it's not an explanation if you don't know what evil is. And it may seem quite simple. Everyone knows what evil is. It's what's not good. But it's not. Understanding the nature of evil is also how we understand the nature of man. And when we understand that, we start to understand ourselves. And that's where the whole conversation about Chris Watts gets very, very, very uncomfortable. Because when we understand the nature of man, and we understand the nature of this man, we start to understand how we aren't very different from Chris Watts. That's not a slip of the tongue from me. We are not very different from Chris Watts or any other criminal or murderer. Our susceptibility to evil is very similar to their susceptibility to evil. You may not believe it, but if you just apply this similar levels of anxiety, insecurity, lack of control, and so on and so on and so on, it becomes almost inevitable for people to take matters into extreme, all people. And this isn't an indictment of all people, it's simply reality, and it is something we need to bear in mind in our own lives, otherwise we could be susceptible to evil, in inverted commas, ourselves. In terms of Ernest Becker, and in terms of what he says that can be applied and analyzed and understood about the Chris Watts case, I'm only going to refer to one amazing quote that he wrote. And when it comes to Ernest Becker, you can't listen to him once. You can't read something he said once and walk away. You kind of read it in the beginning, it's like alien, you don't know what he's saying. You read it through a couple of times, and then slowly something dawns on you, something that you've never thought of before, something that is a different way of looking at things, something that is incredibly incisive and surgical in its application. And this is why I have found him so tremendously valuable, so tremendously meaningful and useful. And so I'm going to just use one quote that he's made and then just apply it just to illustrate what I'm talking about, and it's to do with evil. Ernest Becker has written a book called Escape from Evil. He won the Pulitzer Prize for The Denial of Death, which touches on similar stuff. So there's a heck of a lot more to go into, which I'm not going to. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to just deal with this quote, and here it is. So wherever you are, if you're driving, if you're at home, just mentally clear the slate of your mind. Just wash away all the colors that are on your canvas and make your canvas like a white canvas, and just open your mind to these words. Take a deep breath and listen. The root of humanly caused evil is not man's animal nature, not territorial aggression or innate selfishness, but our need to gain self-esteem, deny our mortality, and achieve a heroic self-image. Our desire for the best is the cause of the worst. I'm going to read that a second time. The root of humanly caused evil is not man's animal nature, not territorial aggression or innate selfishness, but our need to gain self-esteem, deny our mortality, and achieve a heroic self-image. Our desire for the best is the cause of the worst. Now you might be reluctant or resistant or not sure how to apply that to yourself, and that's fine. Let's apply that to Chris Watts, right? And we're going to do it briefly. I'm not going to go through it in the way that it deserves, but we're going to touch on it quite simply. And this quote's basically separated into two areas. It says what the root of humanly caused evil is not, and then it says what the root of humanly caused evil is. And so if you think of Chris Watts and you say the root of humanly caused evil, the root of the Watts family murders was not man's animal nature. In other words, it wasn't his affair with Kissinger, it wasn't the lust, it wasn't the sex, it wasn't the desire, it wasn't the animalistic urge to procreate with someone else. It wasn't any of that. Nor was it territorial aggression. It wasn't him wanting a home somewhere else. It wasn't an argument over the finances. It wasn't control over even what would happen to the house. It wasn't some kind of divorce custody scenario. It wasn't some kind of conflagration over who gets what, right? It wasn't that. So it wasn't the affair, it wasn't money, it wasn't about the divorce. And then he adds a third dimension. He says it wasn't about innate selfishness either. The root of humanly caused evil isn't about innate selfishness. In other words, this whole argument that Chris Watts is a narcissist and that's why he committed the crime. Narcissists are selfish. And so this is a opportunity for you to say, I'm a evangelist for narcissism. I'm a complete and utter, I totally subscribe to that. This is my opportunity to step out of the room and to say, how dare you, this is definitely about narcissism. I hate Ernest Becker, I hate you, I disagree. This is your opportunity to step out of the room and go your own way to that. Okay. Because Becker says it's not about selfishness. This crime wasn't committed, this evil wasn't committed because of selfishness. And so you've got those three areas that Becker's dismissing. He's saying that's not the cause of evil. That's not the cause of this crime. And you can take that or leave it. You can say, no, I think it was his animal nature. I think it was this and that. I think it was because he was selfish. I mean, didn't he do what he did because he was selfish? What else could it be? Becker is saying it's not those things. And I disagree with him a little bit here to say that, I wouldn't say it's not that at all. In other words, it's not black and white to say it's this, not that. What Becker's actually saying here is it's more something else. The root of human evil is more about something else than these things. In other words, these things are part of it, but it's more part of something else. And I'm going to explain that now as the second part of his contention. Becker is saying that the root of humanly caused evil is the need to gain self-esteem. Becker is saying the root of humanly caused evil and the reason the crimes were committed against this family was because of Watts denying his own mortality. What does that mean? The root of humanly caused evil in this case is Watts trying to achieve a heroic self-image. What does that mean? Now what this whole line of inquiry really deserves, and which is why I've written so many books about it, are chapters devoted to what we're talking about here and referencing aspects of this in the discovery and in Watts' personality and in his identity and in what he's doing and why he responds in a certain way. We're not going to do that here, but we're going to touch on it very lightly. We're just going to gloss over it. Becker says that the root of humanly caused evil is based on our need to gain self-esteem. And if you apply that to the social media in terms of Shanann's social media, what is all that thriving about? What are all those promotional videos about? It's based on self-esteem. What was Watts wearing those Thrive patches all about? It was based on him losing weight, becoming a more attractive animal, and being more good looking in the eyes of his mistress. And we know that's what she thought. She thought he was fit, well built, attractive and handsome. I mean, he was referred to by his colleagues as a silver fox. They thought of him in that way. And so everyone has a need to gain self-esteem. And what that tells you is this incredible need to gain self-esteem is a route to bring evil into the world. And the reason for this is the ways that we try to gain self-esteem is often through lying, through covering over the things that are not nice about ourselves, right? And that is what Chris Watts did when he committed this crime, is he lied about who he really was. He committed the crime as part of lying about what is really part of his life, the pregnancy, a wife, a controlling wife, a wife that he didn't know how to deal with. And that's part of his self-esteem. I don't know how to have a divorce. I don't know how to confront somebody. I don't know how to go through the process of a divorce and how that's going to look like. What am I going to look like if I get divorced? What is this other person going to say about me? And so we see a clear indicator for why Watts actually committed this crime. It's to protect his self-esteem. And that whole journey hasn't stopped doing. He hasn't stopped trying to protect his self-esteem by coming up with all the elaborate lies and bogus confessions. All of that, if you're saying, why did he say this, why did he say that? It's his way of trying to protect his self-esteem. If you don't understand it, it's because you don't understand this crime very well. It's not because the contention's not true. It's because your understanding is defective. All of this is about him trying to protect his self-esteem. Him wanting to be with Kissinger was also about his self-esteem. When he was with her, he liked who he was. He liked who she was. He felt listened to. He felt his esteem rising. And so the crime, this horrible, nightmarish, evil crime, is the flip side to that self-esteem. It's the ugly, dark underbelly to, in order to have self-esteem, I've got to brush these things under the carpet. I've got to hide these things away. I've got to do these terrible things in order that I can get the self-esteem that I want. And you know what? Everyone is doing that every day. People's social media is a kind of a hypocritical thing where what you're saying in public hides what you are like in private, right? There's so much more to talk about that. I'm not going to go into all of that. I'm going to go instead to the next thing Becker refers to, which is that the root of humanly caused evil is also caused by our denial of our mortality. And what does that mean? What does it mean to deny our mortality? It's kind of a symbolic way of referring to denying our weaknesses, our mistakes, our flaws. Ultimately, when we deny our mortality, we're saying we are directly or indirectly, we are denying the fact that one day we will die. Right? That's denying our mortality. The fact that we are born ultimately to die and there's nothing we can do about it. That's the ultimate denial of ourselves. It's the fact that we aren't gods, we aren't perfect. You can do all these things and trying to be perfectionist and be OCD and be controlling, but ultimately we are all food for worms. No matter what we do, we are all going to die, all of us. And so in our various denials of our mortality, we bring evil into the world. In our sort of contrivances and all our ways to hide our mortality, we bring evil into the world. And a very good analogy for this is you take Watts and what he did, and he's denying the mortality of his family. He's denying the fact not only that they are dead, but that he killed them. And through the denial of that, through that he's lying, and that brings evil into the world. That brings evil into the world, the fact that he's not being truthful about why he did what he did. If he could tell us why he did what he did, there'd be a sense of relief that he has this weakness in him, and this is how he responded, and people could draw something from that, draw knowledge from that, draw something into their own lives from that. Don't let the same thing happen to you. But instead, he denies it, he makes up successive lies, and this then causes conspiracies and confusion and more denial amongst the rest of us. And again, there's a lot more to say about that, but instead let's go to the next one and the final one, and I think the most important one, which is that the root of humanly caused evil, the root of this crime from Chris Watts, the central reason, the kernel for why this terrible crime happened, was because Watts wanted to achieve a heroic self-image. In other words, he wants to start a new life with a new person, with a new wife. And in order to do that, he needs a heroic self-image. He needs to be seen as a good guy. He needs to be seen as a nice guy. He needs to be a hero. And part of that, I guess, is having the accoutrements that he needs, which is a house and money and a good reputation. And he knows that he can't have this self-image if Shanann is allowed to live. He can't have this heroic sense of self if Shanann is allowed to live and do kind of a nutgate on him, on what a rotten husband he is, what a terrible father he is, given that she's pregnant, what a useless sack of S he actually is. She's going to destroy him if he's allowed to, if he allows her to live. And he knows that if he wants this life, he wants this affair to become what he wants it to become with Kissinger, he needs to preserve above all his heroic self-image. So why does he commit this crime? Why does he wipe out his family? Why does he wipe out this residue of failure? Well, it's to preserve his sense of being a hero. And so it's an incredible insight that we get from Ernest Becker. I'm not going to take it any further than that. I hope you found it interesting. As I say, I have written a lot about Ernest Becker. I've really found his insights to be incredible, not just in this case, but in many other cases. It's helped me to fathom the child psychology aspects of other cases, and to see these criminals through their psychology, not through ours, and through the psychology of evil, which is criminal psychology, and not through just sort of generic psychology. If you found this episode interesting, and I hope you have, please like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thank you for listening.